nonprofit engagement through media, really important topic. As we can see from the elections and from everything that's going on around us, online is going to be a major focus over the next year. So please do join in on the discussion. So let's get the show on the road. We'll be broadcasting as well through Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and other social media channels. Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your weekly update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim, and today we're having an open mic show on using media to generate support for nonprofits. Special guest Jim Cheydleur is joining me to keep things interesting. He is Director of Leadership Giving of Goodwill of Southern California. We just actually did a two-part series with his organization, initiated by him and through a discussion. And he's had a really interesting career as a recording artist, nonprofit fundraiser, marketeer for a whole range of nonprofits. Jim, thanks so much for joining in.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
And guests, please do raise your hand and let's get you on mic, because we want this to be very interactive. So just to sort of start us off, Jim, you've had a fantastic career, so I have a burning question.
Okay.
What's it like to record with John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin?
I mean, it would be surreal, except for it was, months worth of just getting to know him and just sort of basking in it. But my biggest regret of the whole thing is that since we were both bass players, everyone else in the band got to jam with him except for me.
It's really amazing, that sort of connection and that career arc, right? As an artist, as a session musician, and then being able to then transform this into the kind of fundraising that you do right now and the attention getting that you do right now. Could you talk a little bit about the connection between art, getting attention for art, and getting attention for nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders?
For sure. To me, marketing is really about being agile and just sort of knowing where you are in, what's available to you. I was in a band back when it was really about tacking up flyers on telephone poles on Melrose Boulevard. And, that's where you knew your audience was, and that's what you needed to do. And over the course of time, that has certainly changed. I think, obviously now, being online, the web is the tool. Perhaps more than television, more than that, certainly less expensive than some of those standard means of communication. And my approach has always been, it's not, who it's who knows you. And in terms of supporting art, supporting education, supporting good causes, people want to help, people want to support. Maybe not everyone, but so many people do. And, if they have the capacity to give, they have the willingness to give. If they don't know about your mission, they're going to give to somebody else. And it's about, matching that affinity. So in a band, you make a flyer that sort of shows the personality of the band. When you're in an organization, you need to show people that if they invest in your nonprofit, what are the results? You got to show people that have been helped by your organization. You need to show that your organization knows what it's doing. And those are really the keys. For Goodwill, our challenge was that, most people say Goodwill, they're great. I've heard about them. Everyone around the world has heard about Goodwill. What do? They have some thrift stores and they do some good. When COVID happened, it's not just the health crisis, which continues to affect society. What we noticed in Goodwill is that so many people are out of a job.
Right.
And with all the changes, people might be out of, an industry that may never come back.
So in your case, when we did that two-part series, your challenge was that you wanted to make sure that people knew not only about the stores and the retail operations and the donations and so on, you wanted to talk about jobs. When we do work on environmental nonprofits, the real issue is, how do you create action and consciousness for the need for action? And there are different actions that can be taken. land conservation, clean water, clean air, the issues around climate change. If we don't get the word out, then it doesn't matter how great the leaders are. We don't have the force of the public behind those actions. You know, when we talk about art and supporting artists, if we don't get the word out, nobody comes to the shows. If we're talking about caring for children, if we don't get the word out, it doesn't matter how great a leader we might have for an organization, right? If we don't get the word out, then the funding doesn't happen, the volunteers don't happen. So that's really the question. If you look at the situation right now, and I want to throw this out to our attendees, and please do participate. We're very interested in your ideas because we're trying to actually improve the situation in a systemic way for nonprofits using the platform of Oppenheim TV. We're trying to produce shows that help you get the word out. So we want to improve. We want to hear from you. The real question is, we can't afford as a sector to compete for advertising on broadcast networks, right? We can't afford to just do 20-second spots of public service announcements because people, it sort of goes over their heads. It's not engaging enough. So how do we actually do this? Do we do it through blogging? Do we do it through producing our own articles? Do we create our own shows? Do we work in partnership with organizations like, you know, the Oppenheim folks, so my company, to get the word out? How do we do this, Jim? I mean, you're not just working with us, you're working with others as well. How are you approaching this?
That is exactly the issue that we were dealing with. So when we recognized that nobody really knew that Goodwill is an expert in workforce development and job placement, we started this Do Goodwill campaign, and it is just ramping up. And being on your show and the nonprofit report, that is, you know, one of our first endeavors, because we realize that that is the space that we need people to recognize us, or one of the spaces. We're not just looking to, you know, advertise to the general public. We want partners. We want to be you know, in the conversation in the nonprofit space, where other people who maybe are dealing with veterans or homeless, you know, our Friends Without Homes in Southern California, people with intellectual disabilities, everyone who's helping people who are part of the crowd that we're helping, you know, with barriers to employment, we want to talk with them. What are they finding out? Like, how do we reach the people that maybe need services who don't even realize that they're there? How do we reach the people who can help us serve these people and combine forces? Because, you know, every nonprofit, you know, is strapped to a certain extent. We need to work together in order to help the people we want to help. You know, part of the campaign. A
question from Wafa Khanun, and by the way, I'm happy to put you on live, Wafa. But just, and if you want to do that, just raise your hand through the system. But one of the things that Wafa said is that we need to do public service announcements. My question for the group, for all the listeners, is whether public service announcements are enough, right? If you get a 10-second spot on ABC or CBS or on one of the other channels, Fox, and somebody gets up and says, help Goodwill, right? I mean, you're not going to say no. But is that the kind of engagement that really brings you the kind of attention and the textured attention you need for your work?
I think that, you know, that's great, right? You want to have whatever exposure that you can have. But I think the issues now are more complicated than can be addressed in a public service announcement. I mean, you can say, if you haven't noticed, there are a lot of people without jobs. If you haven't heard, Goodwill is all about jobs. Help us now. That's great, but I think people want to hear a little bit more about what's going on. And, you know, not to pander to you, but I have to say this format, a half an hour is a great amount of time to dig a little deeper, approach the issues from a more sincere point of view than what might come off as just an ad. You know, maybe someone hears the public service announcement and then they see something like this and they can really go, oh, I've heard about that. Let's find out more. Then you're really building that affinity, and people have a lot of choices, right? And what they're going to support. People maybe don't care about just one issue. So they're making decisions too. They want to hear, what's really going on. What has this organization done? Whether it's a museum or a social service organization, they want to know if they are going to decide to invest their hard-earned dollars, what is going to be the return. And I think on a PSA, you can give an impression, but a discussion, amongst, thought leaders, that's the kind of thing where people say, all right, that is an institution worth supporting. They've been around, they're going to be around. They're like me. They see what's going on. They see an issue, and they're doing something about it.
I'm going to let Wafa come on. Let me bring you on here. Let's try and get you to unmute. And Wafa, are you around?
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, James.
Good morning. Good morning. So, what do you think about this whole idea of more textured interactions with constituents?
Well, I think it's really important at this time, especially with COVID-19, for all nonprofit organizations to come together and really highlight what they have done and collaborate on a campaign. And when I say public service announcements, that it could actually bring in all of these nonprofit within, certain demographics and say, how can we celebrate what has been done? How can we overcome the challenges? And then come up with a public service announcement where the media can get involved and, be behind. So if it's homelessness, let's see how we could tackle. If it is, lack of jobs, let's see what we can do. Maybe the collaboration with the ADD, for example, maybe. So the partnership is very important, in my opinion, at this time.
You're raising some really interesting questions. Oh, and by the way, we can accommodate up to 3 guests simultaneously on this stream. So if anybody else wants to join in with Wafa, please raise your hand. But you're raising some really interesting issues. I mean, one of the questions that we can look at is topicality, right? You mentioned homelessness, right? We could actually cross different organizations, and we try to do that in our nonprofit report series where we have 2 or 3 guests simultaneously. But you also mentioned demographics. I mean, we can also take a look at the kind of issues that affect certain peoples and identified by gender or orientation or race or level of income. We can look at geography. How do you think we should put these shows together to engage, keep people interested, and get to the point where they are learning enough to take action in their own communities?
Is that for me, Mark?
Sure.
Okay. I guess, again, it's the partnership. Maybe there is a council, maybe it's a COVID-19 council where, different organization heads could come together. The executive directors of various organizations could come together. That could be maybe, the governor could be the head of that and say, what can we do if we're focusing only on, of course, on California, because I'm not sure. But obviously, because Goodwill is in California, so I'm thinking it's California. So if that's the case, then I think the governor and the executive directors of different nonprofit, that they actually share that core values, they should come together and do a council, and then also do some kind of a campaign, of course. So it's the campaign that is going to bring that awareness.
I'm wondering whether we can just, as nonprofit leaders, whether we can just take action ourselves, not wait for government, not even rely on any third party.
Of course we can. You just have to share all of these values and say, can we come together? And maybe Goodwill could speak a lot about, do they have partnership in place with other nonprofit organizations right now?
I'd be very interested, for those who are attending who produce content, how they are getting their word out. if anybody would like to contribute that intelligence to the group, that would be just terrific. Jim, you had said something, I think you said it quite unconsciously, maybe as from your background as a musician, you said people want to hear, right? I thought that was interesting. It wasn't people want to read. It also wasn't people want to view. Do you think that in today's media world, it's the rich media piece, the oral piece, listening to things through podcasts or viewing things, that is the dominant way of getting information out and creating an interaction with the public?
Yeah, I mean, what I think is key there is the human element. I think sometimes if you read, you can get lost in maybe the wonky weeds, right? You want to know that it's people helping people. You want to, these days it's hard to visit, right? It's hard to come and see, take a tour of the program, take a tour of the museum, come take a tour of the college. That doesn't happen. So I think right now a challenge is to be as human as possible while getting the message out. If I get an email that's just words, yeah, I'll read it, but then I don't feel like I know anyone any better. So I think you want to hear it. I think you want to see it, and you want to, relate to it with other human beings who are working hard to help other human beings. I think that's where, media comes in as opposed to just words. We had I think another thing is, you can't make a judgment about who wants to hear your message. You might imagine that, people, support Goodwill because, we give people a means to become self-sufficient. So what kind of person likes that? We've been reaching out everywhere. We have a partnership going on with Viceland, which is a media company. And we were thinking, maybe they could help spread the message because they care about the same values. But what it turns out is they had a lot of clothing. And it's like, we deal in clothing. So now we have some of their clothing that has been adapted by 10 different designers. They're using social media. We got something like 21 million impressions this week because Michael B. Jordan stepped up and has tweeted it out. And we weren't thinking, that's the crowd that's going to get Goodwill out there. It's a matter of reaching out to everybody, seeing what affinity is there. And then that's the kind of, coalition building that we're talking about. Just
exactly. Using the same tools that businesses do, and that politicians do, and that sport figures do, and celebrities do, but using it for civil society purposes. I'm going to put Frank Villani on, who asked a question. Let's get Frank in on this discussion. And Frank? Yeah,
I'm here. Thank you very much.
Great. Why don't you ask the question that you had and make the point you had yourself? Right.
So in San Antonio, the arts are funded through the hotel motel bed tax, right, which, as in throughout the country, has been decimated. So we decided as a community to get together, and we formed an alliance called CAUSA, Cultural Arts Unite for San Antonio. Mm-hmm. And it's 80 nonprofits that have gotten together. And we've gotten Center City Development in our city to also get together with us. And we've got the Alex Briseno Leadership Group. And so what's happening is we're forming a platform that goes out to the community, like the Alex Briseno one works specifically with the Latino population. So they're reaching out throughout those areas. And we're putting together a platform that doesn't talk about any one of our organizations, but about how cultural arts need to exist in the city, how vitally important it is, and that we're going to national foundations, we're going to the government, we're beginning to look at all different levels that individually we probably wouldn't be able to reach, but as a collective 80 different groups and showing the impact of what we're doing, I think that makes a real difference. And as we're asking these foundations and everything to come in, we're saying donate to the central cause. we'll work amongst ourselves on what needs to happen to make sure that the arts are alive and vibrant in San Antonio. And that was a little sticking point initially because so many people become territorial. But we realized at this point in time that the territory is shrinking. And so the only way to make it better is to expand it with a national and global reach, saying it's not one, it's the entire community that needs to get together.
We're so familiar with San Antonio, both on the nonprofit side as well as the nonprofit media side, as well as the search side. We did the search for the head of the San Antonio Museum of Art, for Art Pace. We know about the Whitty. We know about that ecosystem, the McNay. I mean, great institutions. But it is true that sometimes these institutions function in a way that's very separate, where, as your point is really important, right? The ecosystem is the same. The audiences move from institution to institution to institution. So if we start managing these ecosystems like it's Major League Baseball, right? Where the health of the whole is really important to the health of each individual institution, really, really important strategically, right?
Exactly. I mean, you know, when you talk about the Whitty, I mean, Maurice is one of the driving forces on the resource committee, like I am. And that's one of the things that we talk about, is that the cross-pollination in a community like this is so important, and that what needs to happen is exactly like you were saying, James. So many people say, oh, I know Magic Theater, I know the Whitty, but you don't realize everything that these arts groups are doing and what the impact is to the overall community. And in this way, we're getting out and saying impact is what's important at a point where mental health is being drained left and right.
That's so true.
Now, I have a question for everyone who is on, and please others join in. One of the things that we're trying to do is to create a revenue stream to content producers covering the nonprofit sector, right? We're struggling with this, but it's really important that we have a cohort of people who are talking about nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders in San Antonio, you know, in Los Angeles, in rural America. It's really, really important, because if we don't have that ecosystem, if people aren't reporting on the work of nonprofits, then we can't gather the attention of the general public. How do you think we can go about this? One of the ways that we're trying to do this is to create a fund in which we are paying interns and seeding those at different PBS stations, right? We have a lot of PBS partners from our Insight series, and making sure that they're covering their nonprofits in certain regions. Do you think, you know, from your perspective, Frank, that that kind of play in a San Antonio would work, where we actually have a few reporters who are just focused on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders, because the local media has suffered incredibly in San Antonio?
Yeah, I think that, you know, that to us was the key in also trying to expand the idea beyond just the arts by going to Center City and talking about Center City development. And as you know, that there was an organization here called the Revive Report. It's now morphed a little. But the key is that because of the decimation of a lot of the local media, the arts wasn't being covered at all. So the real issue is, yes, getting into those areas and developing, as you said, your own content, which is what we're doing for the 80 collective groups. So you can give them the stories, you can give them the platforms, and they're able then to use them in a way to get across that message. And I think that message has to be a universal message. And that was one of the things that we kept saying. That exactly like you were saying with Goodwill, what is going on that we're doing that's bigger than any people coming to the Magic Theater here, where children come and children can't even access the schools or anything? What are we going to be doing? It's more about, we need to reach out to young people. We need to reach out to elderly all the way across the board. So I love that idea, Mark.
Great. I'm going to try and bring on Stacy Buchanan in here. She warns us that she has dogs in the background, but Stacy, you know, this is the modern communication age. So I'm putting you on. You had said in one of your questions that we're not just talking about money, it's also about volunteers. One of the things, Stacy, that I'm really concerned about is that we seem in the nonprofit sector to have the problem that Jim Cheydleur was mentioning, that some of our programs, some of our work is invisible. So how do we create visibility? How do you see this in terms of creating visibility so a volunteer knows that there's a need that he or she can fulfill, particularly in this time of pandemic where people are trying to find ways of making a positive contribution?
Well, I actually used to work for Goodwill Southern California as part of their donation drive program.
Oh,
and,
really?
Yeah, and that was an excellent way for us to partner with other nonprofits throughout Southern California. And one thing I always thought we could always have done better was cross-promote each other's organizations. Because if on our Facebook page, we can say, hey, look, we are working with this organization, and then they could do the same, we could get all of our missions out and really better publicize all the good work that so many people are doing. And just the different ways that we partnered throughout the Inland Empire and Los Angeles County, it was a great avenue. And also I know Goodwill does the stand downs for homeless veterans, which they brought together amazing resources, and you really felt like you were helping that population, but I think it could be even bigger.
I'm also go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it seems like a theme here is collaboration, you know, and I think that will help get over a couple of hurdles. You know, one of the barriers to, you know, mainstream media is it newsworthy, right? And I think an exciting collaboration that's bigger than any one organization, that can turn into a newsworthy event. You know, if the right people are getting together and talking about the right topic, then that actually becomes newsworthy and everyone can benefit by the attention that no one could get on their own. So, I mean, even what Stacy, you were talking about, things like that, if you get enough people coming together to do something, you know, a reporter will cover that. And then you are in that other sphere of influence. You know, every now and then you can't count on, you know, the television station to, you know, run with every press release. But if you can get something big together, you know, with multiple organizations coming together, and I think we were all talking about the importance of that, you know, that's just one benefit. I feel like the biggest benefits are, you know, the thought coming together where we can really, you know, address problems together and the efficiencies and all of that. But again, none of that matters if nobody knows about it. So I think that is one angle to getting, you know, the word out that so many organizations are active, you know, and I want to say essential, you know, art's essential for mental health, like you were saying, Frank. You know, jobs are essential to keep people, you know, away from food insecurity, and you know, they can provide for themselves and their family, and it makes a sustainable community. All of these things are essential. And one thing that, you know, we don't want to get lost, and we don't want to, you know, sound tone deaf to what's going on in terms of the health crisis. You know, but the world will go on, and we need all of the things that nonprofits are working to serve humanity with.
So we're coming to the end of our time, but I have an ask for everyone who is attending. And my ask is this: we need to have your opinions on how we should shape the offerings on moppenheim.tv. We have 4 different programs right now. We have this series called the Nonprofit Report, which are these Zoom webinars. And then we have the Insight collaboration with PBS stations around the country. We develop articles and we develop opinion pieces. We're trying to put together funds for content creators. We heard from Wafa some suggestions on topicality coverage across different nonprofits, and then regional coverage. as well as looking at demographics. The addition of demographics was quite interesting, and I think we should explore that. We want to have your suggestions for how we ought to shape this initiative. Frank, your idea about collaboration in particular regions is really important. One of the questions that I have coming from that suggestion is, can we provide some sort of a backbone infrastructure to plug in to these types of collaborations and also to encourage them? Can we create some sort of a funding base so that these type of collaborations can share knowledge and get the word out in ways that are more functional? So my ask to everybody here is that please do send in suggestions to us. We'll get an email out to you, your best ideas, what you're trying right now. And then what I'm going to try and do is to put together an advisory group to really shape a national capability to draw public attention to nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. It won't be connected to any one organization like yours, Jim, right? Or like the ALO Cultural Foundation or some of the other organizations mentioned. It is really just a vehicle for everyone. And we'll see whether together we can actually improve the situation. Okay, so thank you, Jim Cheydleur. Thank you so much for joining me and keeping me from looking like a totally awkward presenter. Really appreciate it. Wafa, thank you. Stacy, thank you. Frank, thank you very much for joining. And this won't be the last call-in show. We hope to actually have a very vigorous discussion, an interactive discussion, so that we can help improve things for America and for civil society. Everybody, that's the Nonprofit Report. Thank you for attending. Mask up and have a really great day. Stay safe.